Joined by two very interesting people. Ulrich Nitschke of PARD, the Ship for Religion and Development, if I have it more or less right, and Bani Dugal, who is the head of the Baha'i International Community offices in New York City. And the two of these agencies have a collaboration going on. So Ulrich, can you tell us what you're doing?
PARD, the international partnership is a network of intergovernmental entities, including the UN, the World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and about 65 faith-based organizations. So the Baha'i Community International joined us from the very first time.
Fantastic.
When we launched PARD in February 16, Bani was with us in Berlin.
This year?
No, February 16,
2016.
So that's 2.5 years ago.
Right.
And the idea came out of a consortium and a discussion in the World Bank, actually, in July 15, in 2015, where Bani was also part of it, the UN was part of it, and the World Bank invited Germany and other countries, and I'm working with the German Development Corporation, and we made the point to say values, religion, and sustainable development must go together. After 60 years of secular development cooperation, where we thought we can solve the major challenges of the world with technical and financial support, we now came to the point, and honestly very lately, that we have to tackle the cultural challenges that are ahead of us. And if you talk culture, then you come immediately to the values of religions.
Exactly.
And then Baha'i, and we invited all the other major religions to provide their voices for sustainable development, and we made a book. And Bani is one of the authors in that book, Voices of Religions on Sustainable Development. And that was our starting point, if I may say so.
Very good. Very good. Now, is this a project specifically that the Baha'i International Community is involved in, that you're involved with, or a bit both? How would you explain that relationship?
Well, so the Baha'i International Community engages with networks such as PARD and others to further engage in many of the discourses we are engaging in at the international level. And so that's when Uli had come to New York or DC when we first met, and we had this conversation. It just seemed like one of the natural things for us to do, to join the network. Of course, we are one of the smaller religions, the more recent ones. There are some that are doing a lot of work around the world, and they have been partnering with PARD on projects and other things. But so we have engaged at the level of thought to contribute, and it's largely our office, and I, as Uli mentioned, been involved from the start, but other representatives in our office are also engaging with
So you're particularly involved in the issue of how to look at values and what values
religion,
to consider.
Values and religion, the role of religion in advancing sustainable development, alongside the UN and governments.
Right. So, can you give some examples of some of the projects that PARD's been involved in?
So far, PARD and works in 3 work streams, what we call work streams. In health, SDG 3, providing good health systems, and that's very natural, because if you go into our partner countries, you will find that in Kenya, for instance, 80% of the primary health care is provided by faith-based organizations. By Muslim, Christian, by all sorts of traditions.
Right.
And the government is almost absent, actually. Right. And that happens in a lot of countries, especially in the so-called developing countries.
Right.
I try to avoid this kind of categorization, because we, concerning sustainable development, we are all in a status of that need to be developed.
Yes, of course.
But that is one thing, health. Then gender justice, and that was very challenging, because, let's face it, most of the religions do not stand for adequate gender approach. So, because most of the religions are represented by old white men, honestly, or men in plural. So tackling gender justice issues was quite challenging and is challenging. So then what the workstream does, they convene the 90 members we have now, governments, intergovernmental, and 65 faith-based organizations, and they develop a policy framework which they are presenting now in big conferences, like in the Commission of the Status of the Women, happening each year. So then the members go there and have side events and influence government policies. The third is SDG 16, inclusive and peaceful societies,
Right.
where also the issue of freedom of religion or belief comes in. A very important topic these days, where we see that this value, this human right, is under threat.
Right.
And then the members, for instance, in SDG 16 convened around children on the move. I'm just coming from a conference, a big conference in Rome, hosted by the Jesuit Center, organized by 14 members of us, saying that we have to make the case 28 million children on the move are misused
Wow.
out of the 60 million on the move.
That's terrible.
That is a terrible figure, and we have to do something about it. And if not faith, who then?
Yeah.
And then the governments come and see, and they are surprised by the action plan that was now developed. And this will now presented next year in the UNICEF, because the Convention of the Rights of the Children has an anniversary next year. It gets 30 years old.
Yes.
So we have to come up at the UNICEF conference and say, together with governments, together with faith, we have to change this. We have to look after these children. They are the most vulnerable, especially if they are refugees.
Yeah. Really. What are the two of you specifically doing at the Parliament? We have a few more minutes to talk about that. I know you gave a keynote today, I believe,
Yes.
and you sound like you've been organizing a panel. So maybe, Bani, can you tell us about what you've spoken about here?
Yes, so there was the keynote this morning, and the question that we were asked to address was the role of women's leadership, and why is the importance of having women in leadership positions, in religious organizations. And so I talked a little bit about that, and also the fact that in order to have women in positions of leadership or in positions where they're at the table making decisions, we have to build the capacity of the community to really understand the importance of gender equality and what it is. Because in the Baha'i conception, men and women are equal in the sight of God. I mean, that is a very fundamental truth and a belief for Baha'is. And as we are seeing that, permeate the consciousness of the community and the individuals, we are automatically seeing, as you know, Baha'is don't have clergy.
Right.
So we have elected bodies at the local and national levels each year. And we've seen that there's been an increase in the numbers